So this is a story about believing in yourself, mostly. Um, Growing up, creativity was my escape. It was a shield against a confusing, frightening world. I was a quiet, shy child, nervous of new places and people, but at home I got lost in drawing cartoon strips, creating my own characters and adventures. Um, my favorite piece of work I ever did in primary school was when I was 6 and the teacher asked us to write the story of Daniel in the lion's den in our own words. I filled 2 whole pages of my workbook with words and illustrations. I added jokes, action, suspense, writing to be continued at the bottom of the first page and at the top of the next, right now. I got top marks and the teacher said I was very good at writing stories. She made me rub out the to be continued part though because it didn't make sense apparently. I was fuming. Obviously it made sense. It was a 2-part story. The cliffhanger made it 100 times more exciting. It was the best bit. I'm still annoyed about it to this day. But she was the teacher, so I had to do as I was told. But I didn't really like my story after that. It felt like something someone else would write, and I didn't want to write like someone else. But I kept drawing, kept writing, showing them only to close friends and maybe my family. Later, I went to an all-boys grammar school. I knew no one there. Somehow I latched on to a group of guys a couple of years older than me, who one of whom I recognized from primary school and who tolerated me hanging about with them in the playground. But when they left after GCSE, I was back to square one. Worse than square one, actually, because everyone else had had 2 years to build up friendships, whereas I was virtually silent in class and disappeared off with the older lads at break and lunchtimes. I was still painfully shy, so there was no way I was going to go up and just start a conversation with someone. But my family had recently got their first home computer, and I'd been messing about on the word processor, writing things that had made my old friends from primary school laugh. So I thought maybe the boys in my year would like it as well. And if not, well, they already didn't speak to me, so I had nothing to lose. So I wrote and printed what would become the first of many issues of Dave Kinghan muses on the hopelessness of his life and existence, which is basically a newsletter containing streams of consciousness, short stories, parodies, basically the sort of immature nonsense you'd expect from a 14, 15-year-old boy. I mean, it was awful, embarrassing, cancelable stuff, but it was the turn of the millennium and people were still into that sort of thing. The other boys liked it. I made friends. I got invited to house parties, at which, of course, I mostly hid, because if I was good at socializing, I wouldn't have had to write a newsletter to interact with other teenagers. But people I didn't know came up to me and said they laughed at this joke or that line. It was a total revelation that something that I wrote would be liked by people. So my confidence in writing grew and I wrote more. And then I thought, wouldn't it be great if I could do this instead of having to find a job? Predictably, my parents weren't as enthusiastic about this idea, understandably, since what little of my work I had allowed them to see featured characters such as Henry the intelligent hip-hop camel, Agneta the abusive but unsettlingly attractive antelope, and the pipe-smoking alligator of doom. But they let me get on with it, most likely thinking that after school the world would inevitably crush my dreams and strong-arm me into doing something more sensible. But weirdly it didn't. Things actually went quite well. I went to Queen's University in Belfast, joined the writers group there, and now renowned poets and writers enjoyed my silly stories. I remember at an open mic night, the late great poet Kieran Carson laughed loudly at an excerpt from a children's book I was writing about a timid dragon, the European Union, and bananas. I sent my hip-hop camel novel to a small publishing house in London, and they offered me a contract. They went out of business very soon after, coincidentally, and the book never got published, but it was for the best. And I met a guy who wanted to be a theatre director. He asked me to write plays, which he then put on stage. Up until this point, I was basically had been doing what I wanted, writing things, maybe reading or showing them to people who either liked them or didn't. But now there were other people involved in actually making my work, and other people, it turns out, have their own opinions. Most of the time this is great. You're asked questions or given suggestions that make things funnier or better or solve a problem that you can't work out. And sometimes you're saved from your worst instincts as a writer, which saves you from a lot of embarrassment. My worst instincts include wanting to end a film suddenly mid-sentence, having the characters break the fourth wall for no reason to insult the audience, and include a picture of a hang-gliding orange holding a pig in a TED Talk. I mean, why is that there? It doesn't make any sense. But I thought it'd be funny, and the lovely organisers of this event didn't stop me. Here's another one. In my master's dissertation, after tens of thousands of words setting out my arguments, explanations, and conclusions, I decided to add one more line at the very end, which was, or maybe that's all just a load of old rubbish. Almost cost me the degree. So yeah, collaboration is essential. When you work with other people, the work grows, develops, and expands in accordance to the skills of those other people. And if you're really lucky, those people will be more talented than you and have better ideas. Of course, it doesn't always work out. If you've ever been involved in a film, TV show, play, you'll know that it's a miracle that anything ever works out. Sometimes people's ideas are just too different to yours, and you kind of know from the beginning that it's not going to work. Like when I was asked to write a musical comedy that also was supposed to work as a dance piece, and when I had a very complicated, convoluted story that was then adapted into an immersive piece with audience participation that would likely change the story and therefore the whole message of the thing. In hindsight, should I have said no and instead of trying to make that work and being disappointed at the results? Maybe, but it's scary because making things is difficult and you might not get that chance again. Plus, trying and failing is the only way you really learn. So in 2019, 2020, I was struggling creatively. A script I had written was going round and round in circles with feedback that often contradicted itself and was going nowhere. Another script, a feature film, had got script development funding, and it was, like most of my stuff, it was kind of unusual, which is good for comedy, but not so good when you're trying to persuade funders to give you quite a lot of money to make it. It was suggested I radically rewrite the script to make it more universal, more sellable, which is not a bad idea because you do want the thing to get made. So yeah, although I had reservations, I went ahead and did it, and they were right. It was a simpler, tighter story that would appeal to a lot more people. But I hated it. It was a struggle to write. It felt like I was just like swimming through paint. Every time I sat down at the keyboard, I had to force myself to type one key after another. Now, was what I was writing so bad? No, in fact, in a lot of ways it was better, but it wasn't the story I wanted to tell. It felt like someone else had written it, and I didn't want to write like someone else. I was burnt out. As a teenager, writing had made me the only friends that I really had and had therefore become like the basis of my adult identity and was directly and dangerously linked to my self-worth. I was thinking, if I wasn't a writer, what was I? I felt I'd let down that 6-year-old child who got annoyed that the teacher wouldn't let him make Daniel in the Lion's Den an action-packed two-parter. I was writing too much to please other people and not enough to please me. I didn't write anything for 3 years. Eventually I knew I'd come back to it, but I knew I'd had to start slow, not tell anyone I was doing it, just do it for me. Like, when I was a child. Eventually, I got the urge to do something. I wrote some nonsense poetry, which I stuck up on my Instagram. A few people liked it, but that wasn't the point. In fact, if no one had liked it, I probably would have enjoyed it more. So more Inean poems followed by a trio of anachronistic doodles of Irish writers. There was Samuel Beckett playing Pokemon Go on a smartphone, James Joyce trying a VR headset, and Oscar Wilde composing a witty tweet on his iPad. Yeah, so I'm still working things out. This talk is probably the longest thing I've written since 2020. But if I have any advice to impart, it's to trust in your ideas, your creativity, yourself. Write or draw or paint or make what you want to, not what other people want you to or what you think other people want you to. It's not always easy, it's not always possible. Sometimes you will have to do things you don't want to do. Sometimes those things will be for the best. Sometimes you will just do things for the money, and that's fine, but you probably won't enjoy it. Creativity is always a compromise. What you can imagine is always going to be greater than what you can say or write or make. At least in my experience, that's the case. But if there's something there, that spark, that passion, that reason that reminds you why you wanted to do it in the first place, well, that's a good place to start from. Or maybe that's all just a load of old rubbish.